roasting my own coffee, and then me doing a small run of gift little bags of roasted coffee, Nomad coffee. And what I would like to do, I'm doing it right here on a propane stove, but what I would like to do is once I've got it perfected a bit, I want to graduate to an actual campfire, wood fire, because I think then also you get a little hint of the smoke, which would be really lovely. And yeah, so that's what I'm thinking of doing a like small batch, uh, open fire, campfire roasted Nomad coffee. We'll see how far it goes. We'll see how much I'm in love with it. To do it on a slightly larger scale, I mean, I'll have to see how long it would take. I think I would need to have a bigger roaster than this because that would take all day just for a few cups. So I also have to experiment and see how much I can put in there to roast. Maybe I can do more. But that's a little dream of mine, and whenever I think about it, I get a nice warm feeling. So it's something that I'll at least attempt, even if it is sending out little sample bags to friends, clients who have mosquitoes, who have donated to the crowdfunder for Raven's cancer healing, curing, whatever medicines, natural medicines. Because when you choose, as you know, to do something alternative in healing, it costs an arm and a leg. Um, the only thing that's paid for is the standard whatever. Um, so, and as soon as Raven said she wanted to do alternative medicine, it's just like she was cut off. It's interesting. Um, but that's just part of reality. It is what it is. Oh, I really, oh, I'm getting somewhere with this. I can't wait till I mean, right now I'm just unconsciously, you might say, like I'm just getting better, and therefore the coffee is getting better. But I can't wait till I actually could taste the coffee and go, okay, I want to just go this way a little bit or go that way a little bit, and I'll actually like to be able to have that control would be lovely. So that's my intention for now. Um, what else do I have to say? Well, it should be there's little Chippy Chipmunk. Hey, Chip. The chipmunks are super friendly out here. Um, like if I stood still and I had food on sitting um, and sat still and had food on my knee, he would probably come right up onto my knee and take the food. It's kind of fun. I feel like you're in a children's storybook or something. And actually, on that note, it's an aspect of what I want to capture here is a feeling like you're walking into, and it's why children's book. I think it's what having children's books read to me when I was really young, if they were the right kind of children's book, of course. But it's it's the combination of the children's book and the child's mind receiving the story, and usually from a mother or father. That synergy creates something very magical in a child's mind, and I want to capture an essence of that for children and adults, or the children in adults. And I believe it's a very healing energy, whatever that is. Combine that with a few other things that I've been talking about. Combine that with the whole soul print technology, if you want to call it that. um, Nomad Village is going to be a very healing place. And that's also why I'm super embracing what I'm going through, the hardships, the challenges, the frustrations, is I feel I need to go through this to just clear a whole bunch of old stuff out of myself. And that's why I'm using the phoenix on my mailbox as a symbol. And Nomad, being Damon pronounced backwards, is also symbol. I want everything seeped in symbolism, everything lending towards this passage, this portal, into deeper, better, more soul depth to people's lives. I want it to be very real, which is why I'm embracing what I'm going through. I don't want something to just have a surface polish, a veneer. I want it to be right down to the core. In fact, I want the core, the heart of what we do here to be the essence. And then what manifests from that core is just what it is. It's secondary to what is at the heart, at the roots, at the core. And eventually I'd like to have other workshops. I'd like to have artists in teaching workshops, and I'd like to have some where it's for artists that are a little more advanced, you know, but whether I do it the same day where you'd have a group that are not so advanced and a group more advanced, it's hard to say because I don't want one group to hold back another group. So that wouldn't be a good thing. So it might be separate workshops, but I really think it's important for people who don't think of themselves as artists to have access to very encouraging, warm teaching methods of how to just not to have a great finished product, but how to focusing on the process, the healing aspect of creating. Creation, that's how we're here. So the essence of creativity is super healing, and it's an aspect of what's always driven me forward in my life. And then when I started developing soul prints, it's an aspect of why it's so healing. Another aspect, of course, is the experience a person's going through, which contains a lot of different things that could be parallel to trauma. But I always call it homeopathic trauma. It's just enough that your system identifies, tunes your system into that frequency where you have had trauma, and all of us have. And someone saying I've never ever had trauma is like when I was 18 in Knkw, and one of my friends, we were walking along, we didn't know each other that well yet, and this kid said, I've never farted. No, I've never farted. And we're all looking at him going, oh yeah, you've never farted, eh? So everyone's had some trauma, and there is a lot of room for drawing that out. And then of course there's what do you do with it, because otherwise you can have a toxic reaction, you can have all kinds of negative things. It's a very delicate balance of learning with soul print. Understanding of taking someone through this. It's a process. There's not one little piece that is a soul print. It's not the finished product. But this homeopathic trauma that I feel it induces, it dials a person in, and I feel like a magnet that draws iron filings. It draws out that poison, draws it closer to the surface, and then it's what does the practitioner do to that once it's at that point. Because if you just have this poison all drawn to the surface, you're going to have a toxic reaction of some kind, and it happens even with the best of practitioners. But that's how I have understood what I've developed, is that aspect, even the fear, the nervousness of, oh my God, this is forever, all of that is important. And when people say, well, I'm kind of nervous, I'm kind of scared, and I'm kind of excited at the same time, and I said, absolutely perfect. That's exactly what you need. You need a teeny little bit of nervousness, teeny little bit of fear, because that's all what's bringing this to the surface. And of course, the environment, the attitude, the presence, the energy of the facilitator, all has to do with this soul print experience and how healing it is. Now, healing, a lot of people have a concept of what healing is, and even what health is. And healing, in my understanding, is way beyond the big pharma model. And I'm not knocking big pharma in this situation. I'm just showing where they have their limitations and where their capitalizing and kind of ownership of the word healing is not founded in any, based on any reality. It's not. It's bullshit in my opinion. Healing is a deeper thing that big pharma medicines do a surface thing. You know, they don't deal with the core aspect of a being at all. Nothing that touches even on anything spiritual or energetic or otherwise. In fact, most people trained by big pharma, not all, but most, have been taught to diss anything like that. You know, just like spirituality in general, you know, it's just knocked. And I feel that we're being led down a path where we'll become completely, our spirituality per se will be the big pharma model, which I see happening a lot right now with this whole corralling of people through fear into a box of get this poke and it'll be the answer to all your worries. And I find even the fact that people have forgotten that the flu shot was no guarantee. You know, it was a maybe, crapshoot, and sometimes the flu shot gave you the flu. You know, but it was a roulette wheel, and people took that wheel, and that was fine. But this one, people, I just find it's become a religion. People just seem to think, not everyone obviously, but a lot of people just seem to think that once they get that shot, life is going to be better than normal. And I'm sorry if people get upset with my opinion, but I feel it's drastically wrong, and we're being led down a very dark path on a larger, if you look at the bigger picture, even darker. I think that's where people start labeling conspiracy theories to things that are very real. And I think it's because people don't understand the idea of when you see and feel something and the truth in it, and then, like I said, you step back to see the bigger picture and you see more of it and the patterns and the frequencies and how everything interrelates, you get a deeper truth. That's when I think people who don't understand that connection that everyone has, but a lot of people, it's been atrophied through all these carrots that have been offered to us. Because as we take on all these little aids, our own natural abilities atrophy, and we become more and more dependent. It's just like a drug. You know, you become hooked on something, your body, your brain stops producing those chemicals because they get given them already, and then you get into the whole addiction thing, and on and on and on. Everyone knows a bit about that. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We're being turned into addicts, and we're being squeezed out of, in the name of practicality, we're being squeezed out of anything that even slightly smells of spiritual or religion has just become a bad name now, because, and I'm worse for it. I used to, you know, the whole Catholic Church thing and priests and diddling little boys and things. I just became an anti-Christian for a long time, and I'm really, years now I've been trying to open up my judgmental self, and I explored through being interested in Sufism. I explored Islam, and definitely there is a fundamental kind of religious behavior in my way of seeing things that is very locked, no different than this whole religious behavior of believing in big pharma. It's a locked in, fundamental, inflexible, not willing to look at other pictures. Like, I don't want to, how do I get things across without risking upsetting someone? Can't. So I think of Jehovah's Witness. I remember one time when I was living in Whistler and they came to the door. So I said to them honestly, I said, look, I will read your book that you're holding out to me. I promise you I will read it with an open mind. And we can even sit down and discuss it. But I want you, in turn, to read one of my books so that when we get together, we can have a real discussion. Nope, not allowed to. I've said this a million times before. Because of my work, I have trained myself to see patterns, and patterns that have a nice open flow and open up to the infinite, and there's patterns that lock you in. And this is a lock-in pattern in to my perceptions, and I'm going to hold to it. It's a lock-in pattern. This inflexibility of the big pharma model, and certain people, you can't even have a light discussion about what if. Well, have you looked into, or other things like that. Like I just posted a little short thing, really well done, on ivermectin and the effectiveness in treating this thing that we've been dealing with for the last year. Don't want to mention names. And it's super safe. It's been used for ages. There was an example the doctor was saying of someone, an elderly person, the adult child of that person couldn't even, it was when they couldn't even have one person with them when they're dying, and it was not looking good, and the doctor was like, I just got to look, is there any other possible chance I can save this person? And then they read this thing about ivermectin. They said, fuck, I gotta give them this chance. And they gave them a dose of ivermectin late on in this situation. And they said from the one dose, the results were profound, and they saved the person. Okay, now you can jump on this and go, oh, I Snoped it and whatever. Well, that's what Snopes is for. They are to discredit anything that doesn't fit the paradigm. Sorry to break that to you, but it is the way it is. It's the way I see it, and I think it'll unfold as it goes. So, anyways, so I'm talking about the lock-in mechanisms. So that's the bad side of religion. But I have, especially in the last year, I've been listening, to many channels, citizen journalists and others. But there's one that I really found interesting. I can, just to point this out, I can listen to something and glean valuable information and feelings and insights. But I don't have to buy the person's story fully at all. I can see parallels, and that's the case with a lot of groups that I've been listening to, or people that I didn't even, wasn't the reason, and then indirectly over time I'm like, oh, okay, they're Christian. Okay, and I noted at first my little reaction, with Raven listening with me, and I go, oh God, is there anything kind of as good, but they're not Christian? That was my beginning. And over time I warmed up to, and it was more like I went with just the vibe of the person. And there were people who weren't Christian that I couldn't listen to, and people who were that I could. So I got to that point. And so long story short, I've saying that I've been opening my mind to other people, other belief systems, and I'm realizing it's not the belief, it's how you work with a belief. I feel there are esoteric Christians, there are spiritual Christians, there are dogmatic Christians, there are, kind of one of the fundamental Christians. There are all kinds. There are Christians, I've heard it mentioned, there are plenty of pastors, priests, whoever, who are programming their people at the church or ministry, their followers, to get the vaccine. Oops, I said the word. Kind of obscene. There, I'll say the obscene. And then there's others that don't. So just to say Christians is just the same as any other generalization. But anyways, to get to my point, now that I've woven around things, and one channel I really, really enjoy, and it doesn't mean that I identify with everything said, and there's times where I go, okay, I don't quite get that or get this, but Scott Kesterson, Bards FM, used to be called Bards of War, and most people know what a bard is. It's the person in all your fantasy novels when you were younger that sat at a base of a tree playing the harp, and basically they were like the newspaper, they were the news. And so then Bards of War, coming from war times, and he clarifies many times that war is not something that you want to be in, but there are things that come out of that with insights. He did a great documentary about the PPCLI, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and when they were in Afghanistan quite a while back now, and he went there and did the whole journalist thing in the middle of the war for I think 3 years, and he got a lot of insights there as well. But anyways, wonderful guy. I really like his energy, his vibe. He just through listening to him, he taught me a lot about opening my mind and not having to have an exact same belief or anything. But I have come to, through the thanks of him, I have come to be able to be a lot more open to Christian values and beliefs, and to really push those edges of the areas where I wasn't so sure about. Was like, oh my God, they're completely anti-abortion, they're completely this and that, and oh, unless you believe in Christ and as your savior, then you're going to that was what I thought a Christian was, but it is not the case. And now also another part of my processing is I started working on, okay, there's Jesus Christ. Now Christ is a term, comes from the Greek word Christos, and it breaks down to meaning the anointed one. It comes before that event. So that got me interested. I go, okay, so Jesus Christ, but what is the Christ energy sort of thing? And I started listening to how the term Christ or term Jesus Christ was brought into a sentence, and it was used differently. And then I started researching more, and this is just my extrapolation, but I feel good with it. I feel like possibly for someone who wanted to understand a bit more, the Christ energy and even the event, whether you believe it really happened or whether it's a compilation of people or just symbolic, either way, possibly, I don't know. This is a really hard one to explain how I'm processing this. But it's possible to not have to buy into someone's specific symbolism, but see where the values come from. And Scott Kesserson from Bards of War, I think is a really healthy Christian mind. And it's helped me to listen and just open myself without being judgmental or reactionary, and even trying to understand things that I was completely like, whoa, like what most people go, oh, Christianity, yeah, they're anti-abortion, and that's women's freedom of their body and stuff, and I agree with that too. But I must admit, there are like late-term abortions that aren't necessary. I have to admit, they do rub me the wrong way. I didn't know that sometimes a live baby was taken out and killed. Things like that. Like there's a lot of weird shit going on. So I was just like, okay, I'm starting to understand. And another thing that Christians are really, an aspect of that they're against is that the fetal, they take these fetuses and they're not always just buried or whatever. They might say, oh, this is kept for research purposes or whatever. But there are products, let's just say in general, from these fetal tissue that are used even in we'll call it the obscene injection. It's used in soft drinks in some cases. Like, what the hell? So I can see where their concern is coming from. It connects with all this absurd stuff that's going on in the name of science that people are buying into, a lot of people are buying into, without thinking about what's behind it all. And I think that's where we have this line and a tension between people going, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and there are people who just love crazy imaginative conspiracy theories. There is that. But this is not that. And I think it's just stretched into ridiculous. absurd levels of accusation and misunderstanding. So I really do believe that these imagined polarities between these sides really don't exist. They've been fabricated. And I think that if anyone else who's in this position is willing or wants to try to see something in that what seems like a solid line or a brick wall, they'll realize as they start exploring it, it's not quite so solid, and it is manufactured, and we need to dissolve it. We need to be able to be friends, and be able to have conversations with people who identify as Christians, people who identify as Muslims, people who identify as pagans or whatever. You're always going to have something that triggers you, and there's always going to be people in every group, in whatever you resonate with, who you don't relate to. So therefore, there's going to be people who are in a completely different category that you thought you were opposed to, who you resonate with. And for me, one of those people is Scott Kesterson, among many. So I'm starting to open my mind. It's not like I feel like I got to become a Christian to identify, but I'm making it a purpose of mine to open my mind, to consider other people's beliefs. Just to be able to understand or see where they're coming from. Another thing that comes up with the Christianity model that triggers me a bit, and I'm just working at it, kind of like warming yourself by a fire when it's cold, is, what was it? Damn, I forgot that train of thought. It'll come back to me in a sec. But there's a bunch of things that I'm not sure about that. And it's not that I need to, like I mentioned before, I don't have to embrace anything. But there's a difference between resonating or understanding where someone's coming from and going, okay, I get you now. It's not so black and white as what I perceived. Now, whether that was a manufactured perspective that made me, or whether it was accidental, it's hard to say, or maybe a mixture of the two. Because for sure, sometimes it is manufactured, oftentimes it is manufactured, these tensions, because as we know, just like wars get manufactured because there's a lot of big corporations that benefit from war, who feed both sides. So this is not a far-stretched concept at all. That piece of plastic is reflecting light. In the background here, I'm starting to become aware of a few things. Okay, there we go. But anyways, you see my point is I'm trying to explain how I am doing my best to open my mind to different beliefs, different thoughts, and that's including to people who are very hooked into the big pharma model. They can do no wrong. I've got family members in there, and I'm doing my best to try and understand their perspectives and not feel so angry like I did at the very beginning, or I should say frustrated. And partly because they've thrown offensive things at me at various times. Now I'm trying to understand and not be judgmental with these situations. Sorry, it's just the bugs get to me a bit every so often. So anyways, I hope you get my drift. There are ways to work through these tensions, and it is not an either or. At every crossroads, it is not just an either or. There's up, down, left, right, northeast, north, southeast. Like, there are many possibilities that we can consider. There's not the dead ends that we have been taught to believe, and there are ways to resonate with your neighbor when you thought there was no way, and that maybe they're your enemy. Yeah, I'm liking this coffee. Where can I go with that now? I think I might be just sort of dried out of that. I mean, there's each area I could go into and expand upon, but not right now. I've already talked for a while. But hopefully some of that you can take with you, and maybe it might help you in opening your mind a little bit more. I think that's the only way we're going to get through this, is if everyone makes an attempt to open their mind a little and not feel threatened that, oh, well, in order to warm up to a certain belief, that means I've got to either become that or oppose that. I even thought, actually, I think it was last night, I was thinking about having little festivals one day when we're allowed to have them again. And it would be a small-ish festival, like 100 people. But what I would like is to have at least some people from all these groups that want to do that, open themselves, warm up to others, consider their backgrounds. Indigenous people of Canada, First Nations, friends of mine, they've got a lot of background trauma that can't settle because it's still flowing through those veins, and proof of it pops up every so often. I know people who literally my age who were kidnapped from their reservation when they were little kids and stolen, someone in a car kind of thing like you hear, and they're gone, and it's allowed because they weren't found and taken back to their family. And a lot of the times they were raised by Jesuits, which would be kind of closer to a Catholic type of thing, I think. And beaten and abused and all kinds of things. Like this happens still, or this is the results of that are happening still. And it was a friend of mine just recently posted an old schoolhouse, big in BC, and they found the remains of 200 and something little native kids' bodies from way back. Like, Canada has got dark history, and until we can come to terms with it, there ain't going to be no healing. And that's another aspect of where I don't like how, not Canada specifically, but this patchwork of trying to erase history just because we don't like it. We're never going to figure out who the hell we are if we can't trace back and figure out where we've been and come to terms with shit that we don't like. And it's so easy to wave something off and go, oh, no, that's not me. It's only them. I'm pure. They're evil. Everything from all the sensitive topics, from slavery issues to women's control of their bodies, to all of this stuff. There is no black and white. There are different perspectives, and they come from somewhere. And sometimes those avenues kind of trickle off into very dogmatic, like petrified wood. At a distance it looks kind of one way, and then you go, oh, it's more like stone. No flexibility whatsoever. That happens everywhere. But it doesn't mean all of it is that. So we really need to learn how to open our minds and work through things. I did a bit of research quite a while back when all the protests were coming out with Black Lives Matter groups, like the organization Black Lives Matter, not the concept. Which the concept, absolutely, but I don't like these co-opting organizations that are fueled by manipulating billionaires. But so I looked up black slavery in the U.S. I just started peeling around, and I found out, for example, and these are things that other people may not like to hear because it destroys their narrative that they had to them. But it doesn't. I don't think it does. It opens things up, and we have to be willing to look at everything. We can't create our own way we want to see something, so it beefs up something that our cause that is very much there. It then won't dissolve if you are willing to look further. And one of them was, I found out that in the States there were tribes, native tribes in the States, who individuals had black slaves. And I thought, well, how do I know this is true? Well, I watched documentaries where people went around and interviewed people who showed photos and said, "Oh yeah, my father, I'm part native and part black, and my father was a slave to a really wonderful native gentleman." Blah blah blah. Right? From what I read, a black slave who had a native owner was more likely to have been treated better, for whatever that's worth. And then, of course, governments changed their minds and things. And when slavery was ended, I read that the native reservations, communities, took on those black slaves that were released and given their freedom, and they could have a place on the reserve. And back then they were bigger reserves, it seemed to be, or at least where I was reading about. And so you see what I'm getting at. Nothing is the way that we tend to be sold a story on. And unless we're willing to look into it and face things that we didn't want to know, with the trust that it doesn't mean it's going to destroy our cause or our reasons or our hurt or the story that we have about maybe our parents or ourselves and how we were used and abused. I mean, I was sexually, physically, mentally abused by my father, which then bled out into the community where I was. I was in a small town, Carleton Place. And, when you get abused as a kid, you become a sensitive kid and you react to things in different ways. And then kids react to those reactions because you're overreactive. So you tend to get bugged by kids in school because they bug you, and it's just straw that breaks the camel's back from everything you're going through at home. So you overreact or break into tears or whatever. I mean, I saw kids when I was going to public school in Carleton Place. It was the O'Mearas and the Lackeys. They were Irish background, and my mother, I remember her telling me as we drove by these little tin shacks all together in this area, and she said, yeah, it's the Lackeys, and we don't know much about them, but no one knows whose kids are whose. The parents are drug addicts and alcoholics and da-da-da-da. And some of the kids who came to school didn't have a name, didn't have shoes, and it was winter, had like ripped shorts and stuff, like the way you would see in a small Caribbean island in a lot of cases. But there it's warm all the time. This is not. So anyways, the point being that in the school ground, I would see these kids be abused by the other kids in horrible ways. Because I was being abused, I think that's why I related, and I couldn't join in with this kind of stuff. It wasn't in me. I mean, I saw kids who blew up frogs with firecrackers. Same thing. It wasn't in me. I didn't get it. I don't know what was in their upbringing that made them want to do this, want to destroy things. Who knows? I can only theorize. But you see what I'm getting at? There's a mess of stuff that we have to be willing to go inside ourselves and look at with an open mind, not with an already decided manufactured perspective, and it's either this way or the highway. And that includes this whole big pharma thing. If people are not willing, if you want the truth, it's going to come slowly. And your truth may not be exactly the same as someone else's as it unfolds, but it's got to be done if we're to heal.